do I really need an agency to do that, or can I do it myself? If you love what you do, it won't feel like work. Bullshit. Like, I call bullshit on that.
This is amazing. Check that they're not doing the branding for your competitor.
Maybe I should practice what I preach. I should probably look into that.
Even if you are going to hire an agency, really important to understand what they're doing and kind of try and understand the service they're providing.
Hi, I'm Lucy. And I'm Yasmine. We'll be here each week to talk about the highs and lows of entrepreneurship, building online business, and the problems we face in the ecom industry. And we'll also be sharing the stories of the amazing women within our community who are all crushing it. So let's get into it.
It was just like,
without further ado, Yasmine and I have spent a full 10 minutes complaining about our hair, and now we are ready.
I was complaining about our
fixed
hair.
the microphone.
My AirPods were off, and I was literally for the first 5 minutes like, Lucy, I can't hear you.
About my mic.
Lucy's like, right, let me turn my
Yasmine.
laptop off and on. I'm like, okay. And it's me the whole
Do you
time.
know what?
Am I the problem?
I think goal for 2025 is that we do at least one podcast where we sit down, turn our microphones on, and just begin. Like, without a drama.
What, instead of moaning for 10 minutes first?
Instead
Lucy,
of moaning,
this is my
having some
therapy.
sort of tech
I do
drama.
not. No, I don't agree with that. I need the solid 10 minutes of moan before we
But
record.
I have to listen to
just
it.
to get it all out. Yeah, but you reciprocate it.
I do.
We're
It's
both
just
as
like-
bad as each
I
other
just
at the end of the day.
We are as bad as each other, which is probably why we're friends. But I also just think, like, between us, honestly, like, how many girls does it take to sort out a podcast? Like, more than us two.
Oh
So
my
it's like-
God. It's too much tech for me. Way too much tech.
It's
And
far
the
too
only
much
additional
tech.
tech piece we've needed is a microphone. It's just too much. I can't cope.
Yes.
Anyway.
I mean,
Can't cope, but here we
here
are. The day ahead of
Back.
our biggest strategy meeting of the year to discuss all things
Yes.
Ecom Girls Club and podcast growth. But yeah, it was actually really cool. Just before we do get into this episode, like as part of the prep for that meeting, I was looking at all of our analytics and like our stats and our numbers, and creepy fact. The first bit's not creepy, but on Spotify, on Spotify, 90% of our listeners are female, which is like completely to be expected.
Right.
On YouTube,
Yeah.
it's like 50-50 split. And I was trying to think, like, why is that? And I don't think it's because more
I'm not
guys
surprised.
use YouTube, but maybe it is. Is it just because we've got video?
I'm not surprised. I also think it's to do with, if you look at some of the comments that we get on the YouTube, it's like, I wish there was Ecom Boys Club.
Yeah,
And
no,
it's
I
like,
actually
it
saw
exists.
that.
It's called the patriarchy. But anyway,
Oh my God.
I don't actually reply that. But I always say, I point them in the direction of some of the like guys in the industry that we're friends with that are super supportive, that have communities themselves, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think it's just because there's probably a lot more guys talking about e-commerce on YouTube. There are like people like Matt, for example, like vlogs, building businesses. A lot of them, the guys at Soar do podcast content on YouTube.
Yeah.
So I think maybe there's just a bigger community on there, maybe like specific
Yeah, I
to
think so.
what we're also talking about.
Super
That is
interesting, though.
Wow.
But anyway, shall we crack on with what we're here to talk about today, which is a combination of like branding and how to create branding, but also just agencies and like, I think we'll title this like, do I really need to pay an agency to do that? And I think it's a question that so many of us ask ourselves when we are not just starting businesses, but like even like midway through or partway through, like, do I really need an agency to do that, or can I do it myself?
Yeah. And I think probably we have quite balanced perspectives on this because Yasmine used to be an agency owner. I'm currently an agency owner. But at the same time, I've always been acutely aware, like with my agency, that the goal really is to get clients to a place where they can replace me with someone in-house full-time, right? Like it's like a medium-term solution. And I just think it's interesting kind of how agencies are positioned, because you see on like Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, and Instagram, there's a real like quite a polarized conversation on whether agencies are good or bad.
Yeah.
But I'm also yet to know of a brand that has not used some sort of agency at some point to get to where they are, right? Realistically, I can't think of a single one that's done it with no agency support.
I think the biggest deterrent to agencies, people using agencies, is cost. Because a lot of the girls in our community and a lot of like people starting businesses full stop just don't have that initial startup capital to allocate to a bunch of different agencies. And I think like it kind of, when you are starting, it's like, oh, dream scenario is to have an agency for every single thing, because it then like alleviates a lot of that pressure and a lot of that weight. But the reality is, like, a lot of us don't have all that cash to burn on agencies. And even if you did, I actually just don't think it's always the best strategy. Like, I do know people who launch their brands and like do that alongside an agency. I mean, it's kind of what I did before, but I was working with influencers and celebrities who like OG celebrities who had been in the game like 10 plus years and who had made a significant amount of money. And so they could afford to do that. But for like your standard gal, you just don't have the money or resource to do that. So like, where do you start? And what an interesting talking point will be for us is like, what are the areas that you absolutely can do yourself without the need for agency? And I would say like brand and branding is one of those areas.
Yeah, I think so. And I think also, and I'm sure we'll get into this, and we spoke about this when we did the episode with Jasmine and Layla at Lux Emporium, who are wonderful members of Ecom Girls Club. Even if you are going to hire an agency, it's really important to understand what they're doing and kind of try and understand the service they're providing yourself, for example, like paid media, to be able to hold them accountable as well, because
so
like,
important.
Otherwise you can just chuck money at something, but how do you know that they're performing well or performing well for you? Because it is a lot of smoke and mirrors. So I think, and that's to your point, Yas, about like finding out which areas you want to outsource to agencies. Like, have a go at everything first to see, because you might be really good at something, you've just never tried it before, like,
Can we also just talk about like what an agency actually is? Because I feel like when we use the term agency, like the first thing I think of, I don't know about you, is like this big company with like loads of heads and like lots of different tiers and like very expensive and like lofty fees. But actually, like, we've got loads of agencies in our community who are just one or two people. Like, you can just be one person and call yourself an agency. And so I think like understanding the headcount and the size of said agency before you start working with them is really important, because like realistically, if you work with an agency that's one or two people, that's kind of the same as just working with a couple of freelancers, which is, I mean, it is, they've just branded themselves or they've just called themselves an agency and set themselves up structurally slightly differently. And like, I would always prefer to work with freelancers, quote unquote, than like one or two freelancers than big agencies. So I think that's also really important to define if you're thinking about using agencies.
I often say that to people when I get asked about, I think because I've done so much work in like UGC, I often get asked about like paid media, because people will assume that I do both. And I'm like, no, I have no business running your ads, believe me. I'm like, no. But I can obviously know a lot of ad agencies through work that I've done. And I actually often say, like, if you can find a really, really good, eager person wanting to work for themselves, running ads on their own, a freelancer, do that. Because it's way easier to hold them accountable. That's just my opinion.
I agree.
And have them invested. So I agree with your point.
And I did go on a bit of a tangent then, because I was going to talk about branding and how like it's something you can definitely do yourself in-house. And I think that is quite a broad statement, right? Because there are certain people who are very like analytically minded and really good at numbers and like want to start a brand, but wouldn't have a clue how to create a logo or a kind of typography or typesetting. And that's totally fair enough. And for those people, I would say, if that is you, then probably find someone else to help you do that. Doesn't need to be an agency though. It can literally still be a freelancer.
It can be a creative
but conversely,
friend. I guarantee you have a friend who's good at it. Like,
or a creative friend, But conversely, you are creative, and like 90% of the girls in our community are. And if you're going to start a brand, like it's often because you've got that vision and that creative side of you, like you can already see it. So if that's the case, like you absolutely can do the logo yourself. You can start and put one foot in that direction, launch your brand with your logo that you've designed on Canva. And then like once you start to get cash flow, then go and like use a proper designer if you want to finesse it and tweak it and like tidy it up a little bit. Yeah, that's what I would say around that.
I think most people I know who have started brands have done the first iteration themselves. Like Yaz did our first logo and the current brand. And you did that
Which
all on
you
Canva.
hated.
No, well, I didn't hate it. It's very pink.
Luce, it was so
But we
pink.
did it in 2 minutes.
Yeah,
It
and
was
you
just 2
started a
minutes,
new like Hong Kong community chat, which was an
I
old
saw you
group, an
change
old
it.
WhatsApp, and it had the old logo on it, and I was like, "Ugh." It was so bad. It was so ugly. So yeah, but that's case in point. Just start, and you can always refine it as you go.
But to your point, I think it's interesting because I always have I'm working on a brand idea at the moment, and like even before you have the full product right, I'm already thinking about what I want the logo to look like and the vision. I think most people have that kind of in them when you're thinking of something. So like trust yourself is the other thing.
Definitely.
Yeah. So that's
Agreed.
I mean that is something you can get done, because I think you can also get really stung, and there are incredible branding agencies out there who do like phenomenal work that I could definitely not do. I've got several in mind, but there are some that charge like extortionate amounts of money.
Yeah. Oh my God.
It's probably not needed right at the start. Like you're better off saving the money for ad spend, Like,
yeah. I was working
stock.
one of the brands that I consult for is like a big business brand. They've been in like industry for 12 years, and they're going through a rebrand. So like one of my tasks was essentially to like lead that and interview loads of agencies. And one of the quotes came back, and honestly, like when I say rebrand, they've only got like 12 SKUs. So yeah, it's a rebrand, and I completely appreciate there is so much design work and time and effort that goes into something like that. But they came back and quoted like 160K. And it's just like, oh God, like, no, we're not going to pay that. But you can, like you say, you can get stung, and they do charge a fortune, the big guys. But they also work with like Heinz and massive brands. So
I think to your point though about like when you're like figuring out when to use a freelancer or agency or like start outsourcing, I think one of the like best exercises you can do is to literally sit there and write down the things you're really good at, the things you want to do, the things like you hate doing, and the things that you're really bad at, and like having those like really clear lists.
Really good. Because then you can like almost see your weak spots.
To spend the money. Yeah, exactly. Also a good thing to do if you've got a co-founder actually, so that you can figure out who does what. But I do think just being like aware of, because everyone, I mean the thing is realistically, when you're running a business, there will be jobs that you're really good at that you hate doing, but if you're really good at them, do them, until you're at a point where you can outsource all the things you don't want. Like focus on the things that you can't do well.
I agree. And I think like there is a common misconception that like you have to love all of your work, and it's so wrong. It's not true. It's fake news, and it's like fed to us through social media, I think, and like all these inspirational quotes where they're like, love what you do. If you love what you do, it won't feel like work. Bullshit. Like I call bullshit on that. It's not true. You don't always love what you do, because there's always going to be elements of what you do that are just boring and arduous and time consuming. But like that's normal. Like I think let's just get used to that being part of the parcel of building anything important and of value.
I do think there is, maybe less so with running a brand, but when you're running an agency, and maybe this is a slightly different topic, I do think one of the trickiest things to do, because I always think personally that brands are harder to start but easier to scale, but agencies are easier to start and harder to scale because they're people reliant, and it's harder to I personally, overall it's a very big generalization. However, I always think with agency it's really hard with like that tipping point of you want to hire more people, which is a big cost, but you either have to like wait till you're super overworked with too many clients so you have the cash to then guarantee paying those people, or you have to take a risk on the people, hire them, and then just like figure out how to get more clients to fund it. And I always think that's a really like that tipping point is really hard with agencies. Like the pressure of there's pressure either way, right? Because there's either pressure on you doing so much work and trying to hire at the same time, which is really time consuming, or you take the leap of faith, like hire X amount of people, but then you have to like really make sure your cash flow is great and the work's coming in and stuff. So I always thought that's quite a tricky one when you're talking about like, I guess it's more hiring than outsourcing, but a lot of agencies hire freelancers as well, right? So same thing.
Yeah. Agree. No, I think
you've hired more than me, so I don't know if you had
but we didn't hire anyone for the first like 2 years. We were literally just working. There were 2 of us, which was also like a massive advantage because, and like similar agencies, competitor agencies at the time, had a similar structure where they basically had like key stakeholders who were also full-time in the brand. So there was no salaries there. It was literally just like, sweat equity, I guess. Which is like the only way I was able to do what I did, because I had no money when I started my first agency, like literally nothing. So it wasn't like I was gonna, I couldn't afford to pay anyone to do it. And the only way to kind of launch the thing and get off the ground was to give equity away. But I actually ran the agency on my own for the full year, built up the client base, and then when I had potential, then I kind of brought that second person in. Like whether I do it the same way now or not, I'm not really sure, because I do think like the landscape's changed a lot from 7 or 8 years ago starting an agency to now. I think also you probably have a lot more talent, like high quality talent available in our space in e-commerce, because it's much more of a mature market now compared to what it was before. And then on top of that, like I've just got a much better understanding of who are the right people to bring in at what point. Yeah. Whereas before I had absolutely no idea.
I mean, it is so tricky. But then, so in terms of when you're interested to get your business, when you're about to hire either a freelancer, agency, whatever, your outside help to help with your brand, first thing you look for?
Do they align with the brand, truthfully speaking? Like, I think this is a luxury now that was ill-afforded 5-6 years ago. And this actually links back to my previous point of like, there's just more talent available, which means you can afford to pick people that do align with your brand. And like, you do actually get conflicting opinions on this. But for me, I'll always look for somebody who I think is going to get the brand, and then you have a conversation with them and they either reinforce that or they don't. But it just makes sharing that brand vision and objective so much easier if you're working with people, have people in your team who like from the get-go just get it. That's genuinely the very first thing I would look for is like, do I want to work with this person? Can I see them in the team? I know that sounds a bit like top line, but it is the truth.
I think it was Seamus who did a spotlight session for us. Seamus is like the ecom finance wizard, and he said something. He said hiring for culture is like so important.
Yeah, exactly
like,
that.
Talking about
exactly that.
Yeah, and it's the same thing. The other thing I would say, with hiring agencies and like freelancers and things like that, is ask your network, people in your network who they've used or brands you've admired. And I would say even for me, like at least 80-90% of the business my agency gets comes from word of mouth. Like it's all referral. And I always think it's kind of almost the best way, right? Because, and it's the same if I need anything, I'll like ask people if I'm in the industry or in that area, I'll ask them who they use or recommendations. We even get it like today in Ecom Girls Club in the WhatsApp group, a girl asked, she was like, does anyone have any like branding like talent or agencies? And I like tagged 5 girls off the back in Ecom Girls Club who I know do great work. And it's It's like,
So
I
much
think
easier.
it's like a point of reference because you kind of trust other people's
Yeah.
opinions, I guess. And I mean, it is different. Everyone works together differently, and people have
Yeah.
slightly different expertise that might. But I think it's a good place to start is like through your network if you're looking for someone
Yeah.
to help you.
I agree. Through your
Yeah.
network. LinkedIn's also really good. I don't use it, which is such an error. Like I should use it so much more. I rely on my network so heavily for anything that I need for a person or a tool. Like I always just go to the network and I always find it. So, but I do think failing that, yeah, LinkedIn. And then a lot of the time,
Even Instagram,
I've
to be honest.
heard,
If you have
yeah, Instagram's great. Like for
I was gonna say,
example,
you say you
the
don't do LinkedIn, but your Instagram's quite work focused, and I've seen you
it's
use
very
that
work
before.
focused.
So if
Yeah,
that
I
works
used
for
it to
you, then
get
it's fine.
I used it to get the photographer for our Christmas event, Christmas dinner, which I left to the very last minute, literally like 4 days out. And I was like, shit, we need a photographer. And Instagram came through, honestly, with like 6 or 7 different recommendations. It was so good. But yeah, power of social, just like network at the end of the day, isn't it? It's all network.
And the other thing I always say, and I was helping someone looking for sports marketing this week, who didn't really know where to start with like finding talent in that kind of arena and like branding for like sport, gym, health and fitness. And I said, always get quotes off of 3 different people or 3 different agencies, like speak to at least 3 and get scopes because everyone does it slightly differently. So they won't be like directly comparable, but like just to benchmark and find the right fit for you is like super important as well, because
you need a
don't just
list.
like, it's really easy if you meet someone great to be like, okay, perfect, problem solved, but you might find someone so much better or like a better price or you know available to work in a way that works better for you and your business. So I always say like get 3 quotes for anything.
100%.
That goes to everything in life. If you're redecorating your apartment, like all of it gets 3 quotes.
I do. I honestly, I think that's like, they're really good pieces of advice there. Like use your network, get 3 quotes and vibe check. Just like your gut, your gut will always tell you like instinctively, is this the right fit or not? Don't get me wrong, I've fucked that up before when I've gone against my gut, but like I do think culturally you always know if a person's going to get you or not. Yeah.
But it works both ways if you're freelancing or you're running an agency, and it's really tempting to say yes to every piece of work because you know you're like thinking of money and cash flow. But if you don't, if you get a bad vibe, you don't have to say yes.
It's a
like,
no.
I think, because I mean, Yas and I have also both been in positions where we've been like, wow, we've just made our lives really hard. Listen to our guts. Like,
and you know what? It's never worth it. It's absolutely never worth the struggle.
No, literally.
But you live and you learn.
And at our grand old age, we're slowly learning, hey?
Oh my God, I'm 30 in like 6 weeks. It's making me sick. You're performing?
I mean, I'm 30. No, I'm 6 weeks younger than you.
Oh, 6 weeks younger than me, yeah. I knew it was super close though.
Yes, we are very, very close. But what do you, because I feel like you've probably done more branding than I have. Where do you start with that kind of stuff?
So I'm actually, I've done like multiple brands that have used multiple different like methods of getting the branding. One of them, we spent literally like 120 grand on it and it was so bang average. It's probably like one of the biggest lessons actually that I've had in branding in my whole career was that experience. We spent an awful amount of money on not an awful lot.
Your agency?
Yeah, it was for one of the brands. So actually the context is the talent was already working with the design agency before we came in. So they'd already engaged and contracted them and began work on the like look and feel and visual identity. They'd already paid like a significant amount of that money. And then we came in and they were like, we're halfway through the process with this design agency. We want to see it through. And we were like, stupid, but fine. Like, also just, we're going to go with the flow. Like we've just won this big client. Great. Go. So that was one experience. I've worked with design agencies on like a couple of other brands and some have been really, really good. And like I said, some have been really average. And now I'm working, one of the brands I'm working on currently, we aren't working with a big design agency, but we are working with an experienced designer. And he's a creative director, but he's like our age. So he's like 30. So he's not like creative director, mid-50s, charging us £1,000 a day. It's not that. But it's more like 500 quid a day, 400 quid mates rates because he's my friend and I've known him. And he's going to lead on everything. And that's the way we're doing it. So for me, that feels like a nice halfway house between working with a big agency, which I'm terrified to do and I do think is unnecessary for this project right now, and doing it ourselves, like bootstrapping it completely, because we do have a bit of budget to play with, like a little bit for the design side, not loads, but a little bit. So that's, I guess this is really rambly, but I think it depends on what your objective is. Like, are you launching with 7 different SKUs and do you need the support of an agency? Are you launching with one SKU and you have a very clear vision? Do you have lots of capital? Do you not? Like, all of these factors will come into that final decision that you then make as to, do I go with a big agency? Do I go with a mid-sized agency? Do I work with a freelancer, or do I do it myself? And you just have to kind of gauge, I would say, where you are with that. I think if you've got any less than like 10 grand to spend, or say if you've got any less than 5 grand to spend on branding, do it yourself. Like 100% do it yourself. If your budgets are slightly above that, then I would go freelance, or like an independent contractor kind of vibe. Obviously, if you've got higher budgets of like 15, 20K plus, then you can start looking at an agency. There would kind of be my like top line markers.
It's interesting because I also started doing, because I mean, like most of us, I love like going on Canva and like designing things. I think it's one of the funnest things of what we do, right? Like I just enjoy it, but I'm time poor, so
same.
it's not normally conducive for me to be doing that. However, I found it really helpful briefing like freelancers to do creative work for my clients and things like that, by like just spending like half an hour myself with like a bit of like my vision, and like do it on Canva, just a basic version, and then give references of other things I like and send that as part of the brief, because then at least, like, I always think you have to brief people properly as well, and people forget this, like talent, like freelancers, agencies, they're not like mind readers, you know. I think people often think that you just hand a creative like a paragraph and they're gonna turn this amazing thing, and a lot of the time they do. But if you have a vision that you have in mind, like give them references, do a bit of the Canva yourself, and like put a mini brand together almost, and be like, this is where I'm going with it, but please can you take it and make it much better.
I agree. Like, give them as much to play with as you possibly can, because it then just mitigates your risk in like, oh my God, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where like you've had designs presented back to you and they're so not it.
It's
it's really disheartening, because you're just like,
you don't want to be rude,
like
either.
we're so far off the mark here.
I don't want to hurt
like,
people's
oh
feelings.
God, you just don't want to be in that position.
Well, I also learnt the power of briefing.
You've got to be brutal though.
You do, like, because you're paying for it ultimately,
nice
and it's so important. But I definitely learnt the power of briefing from working at one of the world's largest banks, where the marketing department was like 500 people, and the agencies they use are those like huge agencies like WPP and like the enormous ones with like 10 million different divisions. And like time and time again, I always saw that agencies would always complain that they weren't briefed properly, and the brand, which I worked for, would always complain that they didn't listen. So it was like, you learn. That was a really good experience to be like, okay, you need to really be like super crystal clear, because like communication is the bane of all problems.
So I've actually also learned a lot about this in supply chain. Like, you should literally, if you can, create like a briefing template where you literally, and like, to be honest, a lot of good design agencies will send you a briefing template to complete and a questionnaire, and they'll get you to do your homework. But just to cover everyone's backs, make sure you've got a piece of documentation where you've literally written everything that you've brain dumped. Just get it all out into one place, and then it's crystal clear, like you said, that that's the brief. And if there's any kind of like obviously you want artistic license, you want them to interpret it in their own way as well. But it again, it's just like another tool to mitigate that risk of like basically getting a load of work that you don't like in return.
Yeah.
And you've already spent that money. It's not like you can get that money back.
The other thing, I was just thinking about this as well. You know, when you're like you're looking for a branding agency or a creative agency to help you like bring stuff to life and do CADs and all that kind of stuff. And you find someone in your niche, which you think is like amazing. Wow, they like know pearl jewelry. This is amazing. Check that they're not doing the branding for your competitor as well, because that's also
That's a good one.
that's also, yeah. I've had situations before where I've been like working for a brand and they've found out that their person doing creative, like nothing to do with me, is also working for their direct competitor. And I'm like,
Wow.
I understand completely different brands visually, but very hard to for it not to be a conflict of interest. Interestingly, I also know of a paid media agency that invested in two competitors.
What?
Yeah.
Do I know
Yeah,
the
yeah.
paid media? Do I know the agency?
You might do. I'm not sure. Well,
Okay,
it
so
was
it's
the
not an
agency owner
obvious-
that was investing. But
Oh, okay.
but
I mean,
like
still,
his
not
agency was running
ideal.
the ads for both. No. But yeah, so
not
also just
great.
do your homework on that. I mean, like sometimes you can't really find out because they won't, you know, but I think it's just better to avoid like conflict of interest. In my
agree.
opinion.
Shall we talk? Because I feel like there's like there's two obvious agency partner like categories. It's like design and there's also paid.
Yep.
Should we talk about paid a bit more?
I've worked with brands who have used loads of different agencies, and it's really hard with paid because everyone will tell you that their way's the best and your CAC will be halved and like, you know, all these great things to get you on board. And then it's hard to, and then when it doesn't work, or I don't know, I just think it's really tricky to know like the correct way or the correct method for running ads.
So like from what I've learned is like that there's literally no point working with a paid media agency if one of two things aren't happening. Either they look after all the creative, which is very rare to find. I only know of one agency at the moment that does that. Maybe there are more than I know. Or you've not got a amazing in-house creative engine yourself already like churning out amazing creative every single week. And like this is something we've actually, candidly speaking, struggled with Cloth Project, because like I'm doing all of the creative in terms of UGC style stuff, and then Sasha does the statics, but like we've just not had enough, like in terms of quantity, we've just not been doing it enough. Like I actually said before Christmas, like we need to turn this business into a content engine. That is it. The product, I'm not releasing any new SKUs until we've finessed the content engine, because the ads won't work until the content engine works. The products won't sell until the content engine works. Like it all comes back to content. So like there's literally no point going to a paid media agency now and being like, we're going to pay you $3,000 a month or whatever it is to run our ads, but we've not got any quality creative for you to run them with. So that's like a massive learning that I've had the last sort of year and realization on that side of things.
Yeah. And then the hard thing with the content is it is really time consuming.
Oh my God. It takes hours, like days, to be honest. Days.
Yeah. It is really challenging. Side note, Yasmine, I should give you my method on how I built content machines for
yes,
brands.
please.
I like my spreadsheet of how I do it. Like, yeah. But it is hard, and it's like I always think people think, you know, content is all about being super creative, and it is obviously.
Yeah.
But it's also like about being system at that level where you're trying to scale. It's like having a system for testing.
Yeah, it's a system, exactly.
Like how to turn, like I always say, this has to turn one piece of content into 10 different pieces of content.
Yeah,
in
yeah.
But
20
then
also,
and test.
Yeah, exactly. And but then also like that testing process. So like you've got all your content. So say like we use Lucy's structure for creating content for brands. Like you've got all your content. Then how is that being applied and actually tested? And like the learnings, how are those learnings then being fed back into that content engine? Yeah. And so like at the moment we're looking at working with a freelancer just to like do the media buying and the
Yeah.
like to do that part of the ads. So then we're both full-time focused on the creative engine, because like I just think, yeah, there's no point working with an agency until you've got that nailed. There's just no point, which is why
It's so
agencies
interesting
like
though, 'cause
you existed and exist.
yeah, yeah, I think it's so interesting though, because I've seen recently as well an example of an agency where they do they run all the ads, they produce 80 70-80% of the creative for that brand,
Yeah.
but they don't want to talk to anyone. Like, they don't want to
What
be
do you
on
mean?
meetings with the brand, they don't want to be like they're so hard to get on a call, but like but they're doing really well, the ads are doing so well, so it's
Who
like
are
really
they?
interesting, because it's like I can't remember the name. It's a European agency, actually. I think they're based in like maybe Lithuania.
And so how much would they charge a month?
I actually don't know how much they charge, but they're pretty much full stack, so they're doing the whole thing. But I imagine it will be quite a lot. And this is the other thing, right?
That's
Because
it. Yeah.
even when it gets quite confusing with paid media agencies, because some of them, they all charge in different ways. Like, some will do like a flat fee to a certain amount,
Yeah.
and then it's normally dependent on your spend, right? And like
Yeah.
how much you're spending and how much work is going into it. So it is like quite an overwhelming thing. And then
I'd
there's
say
the
it's,
whole like,
yeah.
I was going to say, then there's the whole kind of, most people will focus on Meta, right, to start with, but then like TikTok, Google, like LinkedIn, like all these different platforms.
We've like flirted with doing Google ads, but
Yeah.
honestly, as like a pearl necklace, launching that on Google ads, for example, like why would anybody buy a cloth project pearl necklace over a Monica Vinader cloth project pearl necklace? Like, you wouldn't. So until we've built the brand
Well,
up,
hang on, I would.
I
That's
don't
because I'm your
really
friend.
understand that. But you're my friend.
Oh, yeah, I would. Like,
Yeah, but then I just don't know. Because I think like Google is like a search engine, right? So if you search pearl necklace, it'll come up with a cloth project ad and then a Monica Vinader ad. But like, why would you pick the cloth project? We're priced very similarly. Do you know? Until we've got that brand recognition, I'm not convinced that that's sensible. Like, I know so many people will disagree with that opinion, but
no,
I do.
but
I'm going to stick fast to that. Because I
do
really
you
just
run
want
ads
us
on
to nail
TikTok?
Meta. No. I think we need to nail one platform first.
No, I would
But
agree.
that said, we have just started advertising to the UAE, and our ROAS is wild. Wild compared to UK. I'm like, great.
Really?
Let's do more of that. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow.
We're not doing
So
loads,
interesting.
but like, yeah.
I mean, yeah, it is. And but to my point that I said earlier is like, with the paid ad stuff, is like, I would strongly suggest to anyone looking to get an agency, just learn how to run an ad yourself first.
Yeah.
To understand the process, because it's easy to get like kind of, even I used to get super intimidated by like people talking in acronyms, and I was like Googling frantically, like,
Yeah.
what are they talking about? So it's like, empower yourself to be able to
Yeah.
manage an agency as well.
Completely.
Would be my 2 cents on that one. But then I was trying to think what other kind of things people outsource. The other thing you do see, I think, and this is more a freelancer as opposed to an agency, but normally once a brand is busy, up and running, like having someone to help with customer service and or ops is the other thing, like just doing all the logistics and like warehouse negotiations and
100%.
fulfillment, and then customer service is so important, right, for like Trustpilot and all these things, and just, I mean, your customers.
Agencies like eClarity for your finance, honestly, they are
should have said that one first.
unreal. But they do have like a minimum revenue, I think, that you have to be, which is like pretty standard. But I know, so like my partner's, one of his brands, they're working with them, and he was like, it's transformed the business in terms of like forecasting cash flow, which obviously then feeds into absolutely everything, like your stock, your inventory, your marketing budget, your event spend, like every single thing comes down to cash flow. So just having a solid finance team in place to look after that is, I would say, it's like the difference between your brand being mega successful or your brand going bust. It's just so integral. But they're expensive, I think. Like, not expensive, but you have to like be of a certain caliber of brand. eClarity is the only kind of ecom finance agency that I know of. There might be others, I'm sure there are, who like work with smaller brands.
But even when you're starting out, finding a good accountant, like so important. Just they won't. Even for someone like me, for example, my visa is impacted by my business performance. So like,
is it actually?
Yeah. So I'm for anyone who doesn't know, I live in Hong Kong. I've lived here for 5 years, and I was on an employment visa because I came over here with a very big bank. And then when I started my agency, took it full time, I sponsored my own visa. So I'm on an entrepreneur visa here. So my company sponsors my visa. And one of the kind of part of the like process of that is when I've recently renewed my visa, which was renewed, yay. But I had to submit all my cash flow, P&Ls, like everything. So having your numbers in order is really important, because like not just for the business, obviously, because I live off that, it like provides my like pace of my lifestyle, but it also is kind of, there's other factors to it. Anyone who's setting up a business abroad, look into that stuff. Like, so important, like, to know how it works. Like, or if you're legally allowed to have a business, all these kind of things. Like,
I'm registering my first business in Dubai, which I'm quite excited about. Like, it is a little bit more costly. I think the total cost is about £3,000, but I can so at the moment, my visa, I'm sponsored through my stepdad's company. So like how I was able to come here, because he's got a business here and he just sponsors me. I don't obviously work for him, but like that's how I got my visa. But I'm going to transfer my visa over to my actual company that I'm setting up here. So that's really interesting. But I don't think, or not that I know of, I don't think there's any like requirements for revenue for that business or performance in order for it to kind of be able to keep sponsoring me. Obviously it's a startup, we haven't even launched yet, so but yeah, super interesting. You're right though, look into it, because maybe I should practice what I preach. I should probably look into that.
Have a little Google. But and that is something I outsourced as well. For transparency, was like having someone handle visas and things like that, because again, if you're time poor, like, and you're likely to make a mistake on something important, outsource it to someone who knows what they're doing. Like, key.
I'm using TLZ in Dubai, if we've got any Dubai listeners, which I think we do actually. So do you know what? That was a fun episode. It was very informative. A lot of our episodes are like, we just chat a lot about not a lot.
we chat with some sort of general direction.
With some substance. Yeah, agreed. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Please do like and subscribe if you are listening or watching on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple. But that's us for this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time with our next episode, which is on, do you know, Lucy?
I can't remember from the sheet, but what I would say
watch
is
this
keep
space.
An eye out on I would say keep an eye out on Instagram anyway, because we have a lot more content coming your way as part of our 2025 things, and a lot more exciting things planned. The best place to keep up to date with like everything Ecom Girls Club is probably through our Instagram. But thank you for listening, as Yasmine said, and see you next time.
See you next time. Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And to get involved with Ecom Girls Club, search for @Ecom Girls Club on Instagram. But if you feel like taking your Instagram stalking one step further, we are both also on Instagram @Yasmine Chic and @LucyCG.